All right, so in this section of the lecture, let's go ahead and kind of switch gears. What I'd like to do is actually set up a correspondence page, which would modify or replace our Contact Us page. My goal here is to be able to allow a user who's coming to our site to fill out a page that would ask for name, email address, and a short message, and then that message would then be sent to me via email. Now the goal here is to be able to utilize some of the things that we just talked about. So we'll be setting up a view model for our correspondence page. We'll be setting up a controller. We'll set up an action with a get and a post action. And then we'll actually put everything together. Plus we'll take a bit of a deeper dive looking into the .NET framework itself under the system.net namespace to be able to actually generate and send emails. So to start off, let's go ahead and get rid of our account controller, move it out of the way. Twirl closed our models, and then I'm going to right click on controllers, add, and we'll add a new controller. We'll do an empty controller, click add, and this will be our correspondence controller. So correspondence controller, hit add. And so now we have our controller in place. So let's go ahead and go to models. And under view models, I'll make a new folder. And this will be our correspondence folder. And that's where we will put our models, or our view models, for our correspondence page. So I'll go ahead and create a new class under there. And we'll call this our contact email view model. So that will be our view model. And in here we need three properties. I'm going to use the shorthand prop snippet. So I type prop, double tab, string as my type, tab again, and then I will put in name, and I'll do prop string email. So again, that's prop, two tabs, the data type you want, two tabs, and then the variable name. All right, so we have our class in place. And now we will go in and set up our get and post actions. So here I'm going to go ahead and use the index action. Since we have a correspondence controller, why bother setting up additional actions with special names? We'll just use the index. So I'll label this one with an attribute of HTTP get. And then I'll come down and I'll do a second one, which will be our HTTP post. Public action result. Index, same action, but then this will use our contact email view model. And because this is a new class, we'll have to bring in that namespace with that using statement. So we'll use the shorthand action menu, add the using statement to the top, and then I'll just call this the contact message. And for now, we'll return null. And we'll come back and we'll fill all that in a minute. So we've got all of that in place. But now we need to go through and actually create our view. Now, creating of a view gives you a lot of different options. The easiest way to do it is to go to the action that you want to create a view for, right click, and then say add view. Now in the past, we've always just kind of gone with the defaults. But let's explore this template option a little bit. And this is a nice shorthand, quick way to create your views, or at least give yourself kind of a kick point or kickoff point. So the view name will be index, obviously. Under templates, we can do things like create, delete details, edit, empty, which is nothing, and a list. Now each one of these gives us a specific type of page design template that comes along with Visual Studio by default. And quite often I use these as at least a kickoff point or a point of giving me something to start with instead of a blank slate every time. So in this case, because we're creating a correspondence, I'm going to go ahead and go with the create template, and then it wants to know a model class. Now this model class is our view model. So I'm going to type in contact email, and you'll notice Visual Studio picked it up right away. So it says you're going to use the contact email view model located under the wsad_app1.models.viewModels.correspondence namespace. So that's what we'll want to use. We're not going to do partials, and we'll just leave everything else below as a default. So we'll go ahead and click add. Now what Visual Studio is going to do is it's going to analyze that view model class and actually generate a page for us with text boxes for each one of those view models. So if we look through here, you'll see some things that are familiar and some things that are new. And you'll see here that there's this HTML helper property that we saw in previous videos. That will be used a whole lot more by this template because there's a lot of code-driven actions, and the template that's used just utilizes that helper extensively, and we'll be utilizing it later as we do additional development. So instead of just putting in a regular form tag, there's actually an HTML helper that's called begin form, and it's a method. And when you wrap it in a using statement, it puts the beginning of the form tag up here, and then at the bottom of our using statement, it puts the end of the form tag. So that's a clever little design feature. Anti-forgery token is a piece of security that's built into ASP.NET. And then if we come down further, you'll see things like the validate summary, which we used before. Further on down, you'll start to see things like label for, editor for, validate message for. Each one of these is providing the view with different pieces of functionality, and ultimately each one of these calls get converted into HTML markup. So I'll give you a guess. Label for, that gives you a label tag. Editor for is actually a smart method, and it will give you the appropriate HTML input element based on the properties data type. I paused there so you can think about that. So let me give you some concrete examples. If the data type is a string, then the control that's rendered is a text box. If the data type is a Boolean, then the control will be a checkbox, and so forth. So the editor for is a very intelligent method that looks at the data type of the property and then generates the appropriate control. There's a lot of second tier functionality that can be used with editor for. You can actually create custom editors that are partials. So then you can pass in a custom view model and then have a custom editor created for that view model. I've done that in a few of my own projects, and it's kind of fun, and it's a real big time saver when you get into very complex editors or even display partials where you just need to reuse the same code over and over again. Validation message for creates the validator string or validator response. So when you have one of those model errors show up, you can actually have it show up for a particular property right underneath the control. So this gives you that type of functionality built right in. So let's go ahead and we'll just run this and see what it looks like. So this is the view that is generated from that template. So you can see it says index, contact, email, view model, name, email, message. There's a create button because we use the create template, and then we can go back to list. Now a lot of these elements, like the index, we probably don't want that to be there. Contact, email, view model, we don't really want that to be there. This message box, I personally would like it to be a full-size message box or a full-size text box with multiple lines, not just a single line input box. I don't want this to say create, and I don't want this to say back to list. So, like I said, it's not perfect, but it's definitely a stepping off point. We can go in and change some H2 and H3 tags. We can modify this to be a text area, change the text on this button, and delete this link, and we're actually pretty good to go. It saves us a whole bunch of time versus having to go in and code up all of this even by hand, or even doing 1/10 of the functionality that that template was able to do for us. And remembering how to do it all. I live in this most of my day, but even trying to build out something as sophisticated as this from memory, yeah, that's not going to happen. So let's kind of just dig through this real fast and clean it up, and we'll get ourselves moving forward. So index that shows up here at the top comes out of this H2 tag. So this will be our contact us. Then there's an H4 tag that has our view model class name. That shows up here underneath it. Now let's say, I don't know, let's say something kind of smart and witty. Yeah, I can't do that on the fly. So we'll say, how can we help you? So we'll make that change. Now our boxes look good except for message, so I need to find message. So let's see, this first one is a model for looking at our model, which is our contact email view model. So this label is getting generated for the name property out of our class. This editor is getting generated for name, and then this validation message is also getting generated for name. I'll talk about the syntax here with the lambda expressions in a later video, but for now just understand that this model is referring to our view model that we strongly type this view to, and then that's the property that's being referenced when it creates the control, when it creates the label, when it creates the text box, when it creates the validator. So this is email, 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 and then here's the message. So this is the label for the message property. And this is the editor for the message property. Now the editor for is guessing that because message is a string, therefore we need a text box. So what we actually want to do is we want to replace the editor for, and I'm going to comment it out, with a different type of HTML helper. Now there's documentation out there on Microsoft's website that talks about all of the different HTML helpers that are available. Further, you can actually create your own HTML helper if you want. They're not that complicated to build. It takes a little bit of wrapping your head around how they work. But once you understand it, they're actually pretty easy and they're very helpful. So we'll do because this is C# code, so @HTML dot, and I want to do a text area for. So a text box is a single row box. A text area is just like the text area tag. It gives you a multi-line text box. Now, the first parameter is an expression that points to the property. So in this case, it's model, and then we create an arrow using the equal sign and the, let's see, that is the less than sign. Yes. So we're creating an arrow, and then we're going to reference model again, dot message. Similar to what you see in the label for and what was in the editor for before. So then we'll do comma. And then the next piece is an object of HTML attributes. So we're going to actually create what's called an anonymous type. And we're going to mimic the line that's above, but we're going to make some slight modifications. So an anonymous type is basically a class that you create in line, and it only exists within the scope or context of the method that is calling or creating that anonymous type. Basically, it's a fancy way of saying you want to create an object solely for the purpose of it existing here at this point in time. If that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, that's okay. It's a strangely abstract concept. It's very helpful once you understand it, and I'll add some resources in this week's lesson so that you can kind of look up what an anonymous type is and how it works. All right, so let's go ahead and do an anonymous type of @class equals form-control. And that should be it in terms of generating our text area. So we'll save that. Let's keep on moving. So down here we have an input of type submit, so that's our button, and currently the value is create. I want to change that to say send email. Now, if you're wondering what all of these classes are, these classes are CSS, or Cascading Style Sheet classes. Within our project, we're actually utilizing the CSS framework called Bootstrap. And all of these classes, such as form-control, BTN and BTN default, control-label, call MD2, all of that is coming from Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is actually giving us all of the formatting functionality that you're seeing on our page, and they're being controlled by these classes. Bootstrap's actually a pretty cool framework. I've used it fairly extensively. I've enjoyed using it. I know there's a lot of different other options out there as well, so I'm not going to say that it's the best. It's just one that I'm most familiar with, and it comes defaulted within ASP.NET, and it works fairly well. Microsoft actually contributes to the Bootstrap framework, which was developed by the people who created Twitter. So it's interesting to see how different companies start to work together to develop these technologies. All right, so that's our button. And then down here at the bottom, this last little div tag is an HTML.action link. And that action link is our back to list, and it goes back to index. Well, for us, our index is our form, and we don't need that link, so we're going to delete that out. So I'm going to save all of this. Since I was only making view changes, I could technically go back and refresh, but I stopped debugging and that stopped my IIS Express. So I'm gonna have to go and hit play again. And it's all going to rebuild and refresh. And here's our view. So there's our contact us. How can we help you? There's the name, email boxes, and then this message now is a multi-line text box. There's our send email button, and then that back to list is now gone. So we've now set up our form. We have our view in place. We have our action set up. We have our view model, in this case here, set up. We have our view set up, and we have our actions kind of stubbed out. We have our get action working. We're actually generating the view, and now in the next part, we'll go ahead and fill out the post back.